Hello and welcome to everyone across the nation joining today's workshop on how to create access groups. This workshop focuses on using CASAS e-tests online together with TOPS Pro Enterprise Online for creating groups to manage users in your online database. This function is available with both basic and enhanced access. In other words, no TOPS Pro Enterprise license is required. Access groups can be created by the TE Enhanced or ET Basic user at your agency. In other words, this generally is the data person who is managing your online data. This is one of 22 complementary CASAS online implementation workshops. You are not expected to attend all 23 workshops. This is simply a training room set up to conduct all 23 workshops. We highly recommend attending as many as possible to learn about best practices, ask questions, and to become confident in using the online system. The workshop following this one on access groups is adding users, and these two functions, managing users through access groups, these two workshops truly go hand in hand. So I'm hoping those of you that are participating today will also be able to attend the adding users not immediately following. We'll have a short break and then we'll follow up with the users. And then folks, next week, we'll finish this set of 23 workshops with that has to do with focusing on tracking students through classes and reporting class outcomes, adding your teachers to your database, adding classes, assigning teachers to those classes, enrolling students in those classes, as well as adding instructional hours. So this first set of 23 workshops will end next Wednesday, and we'll turn right around on Thursday and begin another set of 23 implementation workshops. Online help is available on our website under Training and Support, e-test help documentation, as well as TOPS Pro Enterprise help documentation. Please be sure to bookmark these as your electronic go-to resources, particularly the CASAS e-test online guide, which provides most of the information covered in these workshops. Today I'm actually going to reference documentation in the TOPS Pro Enterprise Help Documentation section under User Accounts and Access Groups. Specifically, this document right here, Creating Access Groups, and I've pasted the URL in the chat box so that you can download a copy of the Creating Access Groups. And then there is also the Adding User Accounts document directly in here that we will go through in the next workshop. The reason why I'm not going to specifically use the guide on this workshop is that we've had, we've had section 8.4. Now this is still up to date, adding access groups. This is still sufficient to use. However, this has been folded into that Creating Access Groups document here. And as well as in the appendix that this section 8.4 references, specifically Appendix N for CASAS controlled access groups, this has been updated, and so the most current up-to-date information is contained in this single access groups document. So please be sure and reference this. The CASAS e-test online guide is updated on an annual basis as we prepare for our National Summer Institute, and so this is why the guide now has become slightly outdated. Most of the information is still current and usable. However, there are a few areas that we have updated. We will be updating the entire guide and are also entertaining the idea of combining the CASAS e-tests along with TOPS Pro Enterprise and referring to that as the CASAS Online User Guide. So it will become a very comprehensive combined guide in one. And we will hopefully have that ready by the start of this National Summer Institute. We won't be providing the guide itself to lab participants. However, this will be retrievable electronically because right now the e-test guide alone is 230 pages. And then we have a wealth of documentation for TOPS Pro Enterprise that will easily double this amount. Now, folks, as a reminder, the production server where you will be producing live data, and I'm entering that, prefacing it with production server in the chat box. This is the main domain URL or main domain address at which you will access CASAS eTests Online as well as TOPS Pro Enterprise Online. At least for the first time you access TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, you will install a client. This is a lightweight application to make direct connection to the CASAS hosted server. There will be an icon placed on your desktop as well as you can place the icon down in your system tray for the convenience of keeping applications open on your desktop. We also offer folks the Rolling Hills Adult School Simulation Server. For your benefit to experiment and explore the online system, the application is identical. And you have the assurance of a fresh database to work with on a daily basis because the database refreshes nightly, literally wiping out any work from the prior day, so that you can experiment and explore without risk of compromising your live data. You can find information on how to access the simulation server from the help documentation page, the e-test help documentation, getting started, the simulation server. Now, folks, those of you who have been with me through several workshops, for example, the last two workshops I've demonstrated importing records. Those import files use the simulation server, so I will be sending out a follow-up to everyone who has participated in all 23 workshops, and I will provide a copy or a direct link to import files that you can use the simulation server to experiment importing that information. So I would encourage you to actively use the simulation server to try out anything new rather than trying anything new in your live database. So with that, folks, we are going to go ahead and get started. Please ask questions along the way. Don't hesitate. I look at those as opportunities to bring clarification to the information that is being shared in this workshop. So with that, let's go ahead and retrieve a copy on screen of the Access Groups document, Creating Access Groups. This is a standalone document that has its own functioning table of contents here. And I'm going to briefly review some of this information, and then we're going to go to the actual application itself. Due to recent changes to help improve management of your users through the convenience of access groups, in other words, manage your users on a global basis for optimal system performance and ease with user account management. So looking at this table here, and let me go ahead and increase it, this right here is the heart of managing users depicted in this table here. So it's important to understand this before moving forward. Notice the header, it says CASAS controlled compared to agency controlled. CASAS has pre-configured access groups prefaced primarily with ET for e-tests, and then we have one TE enhanced. With the asterisk here for TE basic and TE enhanced, this is the one member at your agency who is assigned to this group, and generally that's your data manager, who has more rights than any other user in your database, at least at the beginning. You can turn right around and grant identical credentials to another staff member at your agency and we are leaving that decision at your discretion. Otherwise, CASAS will only assign one member per agency to either the ET Basic or the TE Enhanced Access group. Now, the difference between those users, while they both have more or access to specified menus and data functions, if you are an agency that has not or does not have a TE license in place, then your data manager will be identified as the ET Basic user. If your agency has a TE license or a collective agreement in place with CASAS to provide enhanced access to the online system, then you will have one individual identified and placed in the TE Enhanced Access group. These titles are reserved for CASAS use. You, as an agency, your basic user or enhanced user has the ability to add additional access groups to your online database. However, we do ask you to please not use the titles used by CASAS for the groups that are solely controlled by CASAS. You at the local agency do not have access to the CASAS controlled access groups. Now, these access groups here are prefaced by ET. These all have to do and only do with accessing CASAS eTest Online. These access groups here, when members are placed in these access groups at your direction, these access groups have no, excuse me, not this one here, let me clarify. These four here have no access to TOPS Pro Enterprise Online. So if you have someone who is going to serve in the coordinator role or the proctor role, or say a combined coordinator and proctor role with eTests, your basic or enhanced user will add that coordinator and or proctor to your database and then notify CASAS to enable coordinator and or proctor access. Now, that still does not grant any access to TOPS Pro Enterprise. So it's at the point when if a coordinator and or proctor also needs access to the data management application, TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, then it is up to you to place that user in a second access group, specifically identifying the data and the menus and data functions that they have access to and data functions they have access to perform in TOPS Pro Enterprise. So this is, and when we create your agency, when we add your agency to the online database, we actually apply these access groups to your database. At minimum, there are 4 access groups. If you are a basic user, in other words, no TE license in place, then when you look at your list of access groups, you will see a basic TE access group, you will see a coordinator and proctor TE access group, as well as a teacher basic TE access group, those 4 groups. If you are an agency with enhanced access, you have not only basic, coordinator, and proctor, but you have teacher enhanced TE access. The difference between teacher enhanced TE access and teacher basic TE access is that the enhanced access for teachers includes the ability to manage enrollment as well as add instructional hours to classes, whereas the basic use of the online system, in other words, no TE license or collective agreement is in place, basic users are not granted the class function. Okay. Now I know that was quite a mouthful to digest, so let's just continue here. And again, please don't hesitate to ask questions. So let's just recap. For the ET Basic, CASAS assigns 1 member per agency to this group when the license field in your online database is blank. In other words, no TE license, so you have basic access. For the ET Coordinator, we add members to this group upon confirmation of certification plus, and this really should say plus, authorization from you, the local agency, to place that person in, say, the coordinator access group. Likewise holds true, coordinator/proctor or proctor. It depends on your authorization. We don't recommend everyone, every user of your agency having access to eTest to have coordinator functions granted, because that includes the ability to create additional testing sessions as well as edit testing sessions. Folks, we discourage that. There really should only be 1 or 2 at the most individuals at your agency who have coordinator abilities enabled, because it is specifically the coordinator who must ensure consistency in what and how tests are delivered across all sites associated or operating with your agency to ensure standardized testing. And there's too much risk if you are allowing too many people to create testing sessions. The coordinator creates sessions generally at the beginning of the program year that can be used and reused throughout the entire program year without the need to create additional sessions every time testing is needed. That is not necessary, and it's wasted resources. Most everyone else will serve solely in just the proctor role, which is the ability to supervise test administration, which includes starting and stopping testing sessions, managing sessions, and intervening or interrupting a test in progress, and of course all the while administering tests. Now, ET Tech for large agencies or sites where there truly is only one individual that will ever be available at a site, CASAS will add a member to this group upon authorization by the local agency. Generally, the ET Tech person is part of your IT department, and this is how we ask to have them identified in our contact database. So for large, say, community colleges that are spread out, most often their IT department is totally on board with assisting you with preparing for web-based testing. So generally, because they manage the networks and the machines connected to your networks, then they do tend to become very protective of those machines, and for good reason. So for their assurance, they will make sure that your machines meet the minimum system requirements, have the appropriate plugins, can make connection with the CASAS hosted server without being blocked by any firewalls, and all the while by assisting you with taking care of registering machines. And that's a tremendous benefit. TE Enhanced, just like the ET Basic user, CASAS assigns one member per agency to this group when the agency license field is populated. And in other words, you have a TE license or a collective agreement in place. Let's see. This next page basically describes the update that occurred, I believe, either this month or the end of last month. I can't recall just right offhand. Just giving an accounting of what occurred when we took the opportunity to completely realign accounts in the online system and break off, separate eTest functions from TE functions. So you as a local agency are in full control of who you will allow access to the data management application, TOPS Pro Enterprise Online. And if you allow users access to the enterprise, then you can dictate their level of access by putting them in an agency-controlled access group. Okay, so the rest of this document, folks, let's see here. This chart defines access rights to TOPS Pro Enterprise Online for basic users compared to TE Enhanced users, and we won't go through this in great detail, but I encourage you to review that information. Access to eTest Online. Please understand that the setup of eTest Online user accounts is not automatic when individuals complete coordinator and/or proctor certification. It is the responsibility of the newly certified coordinator coordinator or proctor to notify the main point of contact, the ET Basic or the TE Enhanced user at the local agency. And then it is up to that user to add the account to your online database, and after that account is established in your online database, send an email to the technology support team to authorize CASAS to enable access to eTest Online. Please remember, this does not give access to TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, and to emphasize that only CASAS grants access to CASAS eTest Online. You as the local user are not given that ability. All those ET access groups are not even accessible for you to place users in. Even if you name an access group, Proctor Access, that does not give them access to CASAS eTest Online. CASAS controls access to eTest solely due to adherence to test security. When CASAS is notified, we will place the coordinators and or proctors in a CASAS-controlled group as authorized by you, and then send notification right back to you, generally within 1 business day. This chart here defines the access groups, or the access given to proctors, coordinators, or someone serving the dual role of coordinator and or proctor. And then this is what is granted to tech individuals. They have no access to TE, but they have very limited access even to eTest solely to register machines. Now this right here, this will take probably a little bit to digest, but in a nutshell, TOPS Pro Enterprise Online as well as CASAS eTest Online functions with what's called a 3-state model. Specifically, states can either be inherited, and notice here in the shaded box, this represents an inherited state. In other words, by default, shaded boxes indicate that no specific access rights to menus, in this case, or you can read it over here, rights to data, are set for an individual user, which means all rights are granted. But it still doesn't mean that access is given. It's just inheriting some other source. Now, a checked box means that that access to specific menus or to specific data is granted for the user where an associated access group otherwise denies access. So we advocate managing users through access groups. In the access groups, you will go through menus and data access functions and check all of those accordingly as they apply to the group. So in the access groups, you will always see the check marks. For the individual user accounts, they should all remain with menu and data access functions in the inherited state, so that when you place them in an access group, they inherit what you preset through the access group. An empty box on, say, a user account will completely deny access, or even in the access group will deny access. Let's move over, folks, to the application itself. The rest of this document here defines in great detail all of the CASAS-controlled access groups, starting with the ET Basic menu access rights. So this identifies all the menus that are granted to ET Basic users. Non-checked boxes are not granted, and then so forth. And then, so basically the pattern here is that it identifies the menus, enabled and not enabled, and then it also identifies the data functions enabled and not enabled for the access group. So let's go ahead and launch Enterprise and look at these groups directly in the application. It's taking just a bit to connect here. Alrighty. From the organization menu, this is where you will access access groups. On Rolling Hills Adult School, we actually have added copies of the e-test access groups so that you can experiment and explore the cause and effect of when users are associated with these groups. Otherwise, folks, when you look at your agency container, the listing of access groups, you will not see these CASAS-controlled access groups. Okay, so let's pop into, say, the basic TE access group for just a moment, and hopefully you'll get the idea here. When you create an access group, you'll give it a title. Now, we recommend starting with the predefined access groups that CASAS has given you. You can augment those access groups. For example, all of you, I can tell you, have the basic TE access group, and so you can go in and augment these groups or keep them as is. You can also duplicate these groups if you like majority of these settings and label it something different, or you can start from scratch. You can also add members directly from the access group, either by typing to search for them if they don't appear in this window, or selecting them from a lister. Now, when the access groups are, you define the menus. So notice here, these are limited menus. The non-shaded boxes, that denies access, just as discussed in that document. Checked boxes, that is granting access. So this continues on down in that manner. Let me collapse this and let's go into the data. Whoops, the data access rights, excuse me. This lists the data functions. Most of these these are listers along the far left, and most of these correspond directly to the menus. If someone is denied access in a menu, generally they're denied access from the lister because they can't even access it. You can decide if you want users to have only list access, list plus view access, and then perhaps no editing functions whatsoever, creating records, updating records, or deleting records. So these are predefined here. All users should have Reports Manager enabled all the way across because this assists them in generating reports. They will not be able to generate a report unless you have the Reports Manager enabled. Now let's compare that to, say, the enhanced user or the enhanced access group. Whoops, it's behaving a little bit funky here. Not sure why that is doing that. Let's, click on the drop-down box. There we go. Okay. So here in menu access rights, here I have to expand it. Enhanced access pretty much has everything checked. Okay. And then as well as in data access rights. As mentioned, you can add, now you would not have access to basic or enhanced. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here. Yes, Victoria, in the manual itself, and as I mentioned in the beginning, in the manual itself, that is now outdated because we just, according to release notes, and folks, you have access to the release notes, is that here, admin TE access groups. So it was in the middle of February that we split TE and e-test access between the access groups. So it was at that time that we created the access groups document, which is 30 pages. All right, so the guide is outdated. Please use the access groups, the single document, and refer to that one. And it also includes section 8.4 from the guide. And then we have another question here. So if I heard you correctly, the group menu rights dictate what the data access rights are. Generally so, yes, that is correct. If they don't have access to a menu, they can't even access the menu to list the information, such as if you deny me access to the tests menu, then I would not even be able to list the information. This is called list. And if I double click on here, that's called view. You're viewing the details of a record. And then to create a record, that would be clicking new. To update a record is just doing just that, updating a record or deleting a record. So that's how these data functions. Let's look at the, say, coordinator TE access. If you want your coordinators to have essentially basic access to enterprise, then notice coordinators predefined by CASAS, and here again you can customize, you can augment these groups. They're totally for you. We're just as a courtesy adding them to give you a head start. So listing records, that's what this does, list records. And you can keep it just at that so that users, such as, for example, on the student demographics lister, you may not want, you may, allow your users to list the information, but perhaps not be able to double-click and view additional details or the detailed information about that user. Which would include perhaps going into these areas to see all the details as well as all of the details here. That's what view does. And then create a record is adding any new record, updating is doing just that, and deleting records. Okay, so at most, and I'm going to end it with this, folks, because this really is a weighted topic, I would say, and so it's going to take just a little bit to digest. But at most, and we have these sample accounts in the online system, or in Rolling Hills Adult School, and let's see if I can just, let's see if, I want to sort this. Okay, here we go. These are the example user accounts that we have in TE. So note, at most, well, people should only be at most in 2 access groups, well, and at minimum 1 access group. So for example, administrators, this happens to be a TE enhanced user. We're considering them a data manager, and they also happen to be serve in a coordinator and or proctor role in eTest. So here's a TE access group, and then they're also in an ET access group. Here's someone identified as a coordinator. They have only coordinator access enabled to eTest, and they have coordinator access to TE. As defined by you, you can augment this. So it's 1 TE access group, 1 eTest access group. Now here's an example of a teacher. This teacher has no access to eTest. They just simply have enhanced access to enterprise to access their classes, manage enrollment, and add instructional hours. Here is similar, someone who is a proctor, and we're giving them proctor access, basic proctor access to TE. Now you don't have to add any of your users to any TE access group. You can keep some users with only having access to eTest. That's totally at your discretion. So I hope that makes sense. We have another question. Would you recommend staying with the setting you have set up for now before altering them? Yes, I would. I would recommend and encourage anyone to use the groups as is, and from there, for example, it's best to keep access rights on individual user accounts in what's called an inherited state. Let me just end it. I'm sorry. I know I said I was going to end it, but let me just double click. Oh, actually I was already in users, I'm sorry. Let me double click on this one here as an example. And I could click on any individual user account. Notice here, and this is getting probably a little bit too far and into the next session, but notice here on menu, let me just collapse these up so it brings it up to the top of the screen. And I always forget to increase my screen. here. Notice in menu and data access, this is the norm. This should be the norm for all of your users in your database so that you are managing them through access groups. In other words, don't enable any menu rights on individual accounts. Don't enable any data access rights on individual accounts. Instead, place them in an access group so that they will inherit the rights assigned to the group. Manage your users on a global basis. Now, and it's only if a user who is within a group needs access to, say, additional menus or data functions, or if you need to deny a user access to menus or data functions that the access group would otherwise grant or deny. That would be an example of when you would augment the individual account without creating another group. Let's say that this coordinator in, say, data access rights, you didn't want them to be able to, oh gosh, I don't know, view tests. That doesn't make sense, but I'm just using this as an example. You would then go to whatever you are denying them, either list, view, create, update, or delete, or actually a good example is not being able to delete. You may, in the access group, you may allow deleting records, but maybe on a certain individual, you don't want them to delete any records whatsoever. So on that one, you would deny access. This cancels out what the access group would otherwise grant. So this is an example of denying, or just simply check one of these boxes if you want, if this is denied through the access group, but you want an individual user to have access to this function, you would check it. The same holds true in the menu access rights. So you need to know what rights are enabled on the access group in order to identify areas on an individual user that you would want to override the group. And here again, either check something that you want them to have access to, or clear the box if you want to deny them access. So folks, I've gone over time, and I'll be covering some of the same information in the next workshop. So stay tuned for more to come. But the key here is to manage users through access groups. And if you have any conflicts with users, user accounts, then the best thing to do is just simply clear all rights right here. Because if things have seemed to go awry and you just cannot figure out why someone doesn't have access to certain menus or data functions in TOPS Pro Enterprise, just clear all rights. Clear all rights. That doesn't take them away from the access groups, but it clears any individually set menu and access rights. Do that, and then make sure that the user is only at most in 2 access groups, one for e-tests and one for TE. They can't be in 2 TE access groups. I mean, you can, but they're going to have access conflicts, or conflicts between access, with access between the 2 different groups. E-tests, it will have no effect, and access, okay? Folks, if there's anything that you can think of that I may not have touched on, or it just doesn't seem clear enough, please give me the opportunity to clarify. Send me an email, and I'd be more than happy to correspond with you. Our technology support team is great in helping you do much of what I've discussed here. Okay. Alrighty then. Thank you so much, folks, and I hope to see most of you back in just about 20 minutes. Okay, thank you. And let's see. And one more question here. Okay, this is a good question here. Would we have set up the sites and then put individuals? Okay, that's a really good question. CASAS will only place your users in an e-tests access group at your direction and after we confirm training completion. We will not put any of your users in an enterprise access group, in a TE access group. We're going to cover that managing users in the next workshop. Essentially, it's up to you to put your own users in one of your own agencies' TE access group if you want them to have access to TE. Otherwise, they will only have access to e-tests if that's all, if that's the only group that they're in. So I hope that answered your question. All right, we need to go ahead and end this, folks. Thank you so much, and hope to see you back at the next workshop.